Hi all, today we're going to be talking about the Rival-9, one of the 3 submachine guns available in Modern Warfare 3's open beta, and why I don't like it very much. I do not like the Rival-9. Out of all 3 submachine guns I've used, and all 3 that are currently present in the open beta, this one easily feels the worst out of them. I have not been able to have this thing perform well in my hands no matter what, and in general I do not think it's worth your time. I really would only use it to unlock junk for other guns. It's not pleasant to use. I'm really hoping it gets buffed. And keep in mind, I'm a fairly average player, but nonetheless, these are my experiences and what I think of this thing. So the biggest problem with the Rival-9 really is a mixture of its recoil and its damage output. Both of them are bad. In terms of recoil control, without any recoil attachments, it bounces. You will not be able to hit targets at range with this thing. And if you do spec into a recoil build to solve this problem, your damage fall off is so bad anyway that you'll just be tickling people past 30 meters. It really feels weird because it feels like you want to spec the gun for high speed, high mobility, but you're not going to get a lot of engagements like that, especially on the maps that are currently available in the beta. You're going to have longer sight lines, and if you have those longer lines, you're just straight up not hitting anyone anyway, and some damage is better than no damage, so you may as well build it a recoil, but then you still don't kill anyone anyway because the gun has no damage to begin with. So it's frustrating. It feels really frustrating to use. As per usual, we'll go over how I would build it, then we'll jump into a live match, and I'll show you what it looks like in an average person's hands, and explain more of why I don't like this thing. So, starting with the optic, you don't have to run one if you don't want. I like the 1X because in my experience, the irons on this thing were junk. For the barrel, the IGS 800 seems to work the best. You get the integrated suppressor, which doesn't matter that much, but you get good recoil control. Worth noting, you won't be able to run a muzzle with it. The clear shot does work as an alternative if you want a muzzle attachment. On the underbarrel, I found the heavy support grip worked the best. It's just handy. It's really, really nice to have. Just gives you more recoil control. It's super useful. For the rear grip, the Rival Vice worked best. You just get more recoil control. Shocker. And finally, for the stock, the Marauder worked the best. The Crotalus is unlocked very early, and it works fine. It's just fine. The benefits aren't as strong on it, but the negatives aren't as strong either, so it's fine. It works fine as an intermediary. One of the big problems here is that all of the actually good attachments for this thing are very late in the tree. The IGS is at level 19, the Marauder is at level 18. Which is rough. Really, really rough. Make note of that because this gun is going to feel insufferable until you get it all the way up to max level, in which case, if the full game has come out, you'll already be finishing up the camo challenges for it, probably. My condolences. Now, one thing I would like to add that I have not been able to try because I've not maxed out the AMR yet, is the high grain ammo. You do get a bit more damage range out of it. I am ultimately unsure of how much this actually affects the weapon, because the beta is fairly short-lived and I have to make do with what I can. It could be viable, it could not be. Just keep in mind that you're giving up recoil control, and by extension another recoil reducing attachment to gain a bit more damage range that you would probably need the recoil for in the first place. Make of that what you will, you'll have to try it yourself. I am sorry that I cannot give more information on it. So, we'll jump right into a live match, as we do around here. And, like I've said before, you're going to see what the gun looks like in the hands of an average player in an average match, in an average game. It's Modern Warfare 3, baby. But what did you expect? Hopefully the queue doesn't take too long, or else this is going to be very sad of me just staring here, saying things. So, as I mentioned, out of the 3 submachine guns I've been able to use, the Rival-9 easily feels the worst. Rust. We take that. Good day. The Striker feels very, very agile. The recoil is very, very low, and it just generally feels very, very comfortable to use. The AMR-9 just feels super well-rounded. It feels like it hits harder out at longer ranges compared to the other 2 submachine guns. It feels much closer to an assault rifle than a submachine gun. Rival-9 feels like shit. And hopefully you'll be able to see why. So the recoil control, even with full recoil attachments, it's not that good. I've stated I am a fairly average player. I am by no means an exceptional player. Please keep this in mind. But most people aren't exceptional players, and I want to give that perspective. I just got vaporized. So this gun has shitty recoil control, and this will let you down until you get recoil attachments. You will not kill people at range because the gun simply bounces too much, especially horizontally. The vertical recoil is fine, it can be totally managed for, but the gun has a lot of random horizontal bouncing that just can't really be compensated for. And until you get attachments for it, you're just not going to have a good time with. Plain and simple, you're just not going to have a fun time with the Rival-9 because it feels weird. It feels unnatural. It feels very random. It's not pleasant to use. You will constantly be let down by this gun. And it does not feel good. And even when you are within good range, or you are landing shots, it doesn't do a lot of damage anyway. I found that the AMR-9 so far kills people faster and far more reliably. Not to say the Rival-9 doesn't kill people, it is a firearm after all. But it's just not good. It just doesn't feel good. It feels like if someone gets the drop on you, you just can't win the engagement. That's the best way to say it. It feels like you have to get the drop for you to win. Even with superior aim, it consistently feels like you're just being let down constantly by this gun's lack of damage output and lack of good recoil. It's not a fun time. It's not a gun that feels good by any means. I'm dead. Unfortunate. Try not to play too poorly so that you actually get a good indication of what this gun is like, but it's Rust. And skill-based matchmaking is a bitch. Yeah, it just doesn't feel good. The Rival-9, it's genuinely awful. There's no reason to use this gun over the AMR-9 or the Striker in the beta currently. You unlock the Striker first for one, so you already have a better option. And if you want a more unique submachine gun with more range, the AMR-9 is right there once you hit level 20. It's just really, really hard to recommend this gun when the alternatives are just that much better. Ultimately, there's no reason to use this thing. If you want a mobile gun, the Striker is already more mobile, and because its recoil is so good, you can run it without attachments and get even better mobility out of the Striker than what it already has. And it kills in about the same speed, but it just feels much better to use. If you want more damage, the AMR-9 is right there and has better recoil to boot. And it looks cooler too, which is a cool bonus. So it makes you wonder, what is the point of the Rival-9? I haven't really been able to figure this out. In the description, it says that it's a lightweight submachine gun designed for room clearing. This may work in real life, but it ultimately does not work in Call of Duty. And as a result, sure, it has pretty good agility even with good recoil attachments. But when you don't have the recoil to fight targets at range in a pinch, because you can't force every engagement to be favorable in a video game, shocker, I know, and you don't have the damage to reliably win engagements at those ranges, or even in close ranges if somebody gets the drop on you, well, then why is it even in the game? Or rather, why is it in the state it's in? There's no situation where this gun is favorable compared to the Striker or the AMR. It's honestly baffling. There's genuinely no reason to use it. It doesn't feel good, it doesn't sound good, it doesn't look good, it's a Scorpion Evo. Unless you really, really like the Scorpion Evo in real life, just stay away from this gun. There's genuinely no point to it. In ways of a buff, honestly, I think the best way to make it more fun to use would just be to tune its fire rate way up. Honestly, you could even cut the damage on it even lower and just turn it into a bullet hose. I think that'd make it a bit more fun to use, at least. Might not be as good, might not be very good, but like, could at least be fun to use. But the way it is now, it doesn't feel fun to use because it doesn't fire very fast, it doesn't hit very hard, it doesn't control very good. At least if it was a complete and utter bullet hose, I could justify it in like being a meme gun. Right now, though, in my experience, just a piece of shit. It's absolutely not worth your time. And I'm well aware I'm repeating myself, but I really cannot drive home just how gross this gun feels. With the Striker, immediately upon using the Striker, it feels good. It feels comfortable, it feels agile, and it feels nice to use. Granted, it was overtuned in the previous beta, and it may still be a little on the strong side, but it feels very nice to use in your hand. The AMR-9 is much the same. It feels very stable, and it feels like it reaches out to ranges that an SMG really shouldn't be able to. And because of that, it also feels very nice to use right out of the box in the hand, with no attachments, might I add. The Rival-9, meanwhile, needs to be fully leveled, and needs to be used very carefully and very well, to get nearly the same level of performance as the AMR-9 or the Striker. It's just not worth it. Imagine, for a second, that you can either eat an apple that is a normal apple, an apple that is chocolate covered, or an apple that is very rotten on the outside and only tastes normal once you get to the middle of it. That is effectively the Striker versus the AMR-9 versus the Rival-9. The Rival-9 is very, very rotten and icky when you pick it up, and it's only when you manage to brute force your way through the levels and suffer, and boy, will you suffer. You might even just get food poisoning if you're not careful with the Rival-9. And when you get all the way to the core, you're just left with this mediocre tasting apple that doesn't really shine in any way. Doesn't really taste good. You kind of just wish you'd eaten the chocolate covered apple instead, being the AMR-9, or even just been normal and had the normal apple instead. Striker. It really is a mind-bogglingly poor gun. You'd think for at least being as junk as it is, it'd at least be funny. Or, like, gimmicky in some weird way. Like, by comparison to Modern Warfare 2, some guns in that game are just bad, but they're at least fun to use. Like, the Lackman Shroud, for as terrible as it is, you can at least half-fire and have some fun with it in shipment. I can't imagine this gun being fun to use anywhere. It's just weird. There's no reason to use this. The match is going on longer than I'd hoped it would, because it's hardpoint on Rust. But I genuinely do not understand this weapon. I don't think the developers even understand this weapon. It's just so mixed. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It doesn't have the damage output. It doesn't fire fast enough to be fun to use in close quarters. But it also doesn't have the recoil control to be viable at longer ranges either, and the damage is still ass anyway. So it just doesn't feel good. It feels terrible. It really just feels terrible. There's no reason to use it. There's no reason to want it. There's no reason to equip it. Honestly, there's no reason to even look at it unless it gets buffed, or unless everything else gets nerfed to be just as bad as it is. Thank you all, and I will see you all again another time. Bye.